I'm Ryan, this is my brother Daniel, and this is Rolls in the Family. Today we are going to be looking at 5 alternatives to the classic game of world domination, Risk.
Yeah, and whether Risk is your favorite game or maybe you just like the idea of Risk, we think these are 5 games that share some similarities to Risk and are worth checking out. And as always, we've got links to them down in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. But I'm going to pass it over to Ryan for our first recommendation.
So our first recommendation is actually the most similar to Risk, and that's because it's actually an official variant of Risk, and that is Risk Legacy. Now, this is the game that actually introduced the legacy concept that's been used in a few games now, which is a really unique twist on board games where you're making permanent changes to the game. You are literally, from game to game, going to be adding stickers to the board that might represent new cities or other things on the map. You might be adding new rules into the rulebook that permanently change the game, and even ripping up cards at times to permanently change the distribution in your deck. It's kind of wild, especially if you haven't been introduced to something like this before, but it adds some really interesting twists over the course of a campaign with your group, and actually has like spoilers and surprise moments. There's literally boxes in the bigger box that say, don't open this until so and so happens, and you don't know what's in that box. It could add more pieces, it could add more rules, and on top of all that, so it's got all this legacy element, but it's layered on top of what's already a better version of Risk, at least in our opinion. Where Risk can maybe get a little bit drawn out, can be unpredictable how long a game's going to take. Risk Legacy, the games tend to be a lot quicker with a focus on controlling these bases instead of having to get complete world domination. It also has factions that have kind of special abilities, so some other kind of variables that add some fun twists in it. So if you think that you enjoy Risk and you're going to have a group that's consistently 4 to 5 players that can go through this campaign together, we have to recommend Risk Legacy because it is such a unique experience and very memorable and could be the perfect choice for your group.
So our second recommendation goes to a game that shares the area control element of Risk, but a lot of the interest of this game comes around the unique factions that it has, and that is Small World. In Small World, players are bidding on these unique factions that are a combination of a special power and a race randomly put together. So, for example, you could have the Dragon Master Ratmen, which gives you a dragon that helps you in conquesting regions, and Ratmen gives you more units than the average race. And those are randomized every single time. So the race that you're going out with is completely unique each game, which creates a lot of interesting strategic decisions. Players go out, they're conquering regions to increase the end of turn scoring, but the strategy in this game isn't just utilizing your unique race, but it's also deciding when should that race go into decline. In Small World, you can put your active race in decline and bid on a new race. You can actually get a new race to go in and onto the map and start conquering regions. So it's deciding when is my current race kind of maximized its potential, and when could I most effectively utilize one of the new races that I could bid on and enter into the map. It's a really nice strategic game, but really isn't that hard to teach. It doesn't have a lot of luck. There's really only one time in the game that you roll a dice, but we think this is definitely a game that's worth checking out after Risk.
If you enjoy attacking other players on a map, then our third pick definitely keeps that vibe while maybe avoiding some of the problems that are common to games in this genre, and that is Kemet, Blood, and Sand. Now, this is a game that is not going to suffer from defensive turtling because it is a race to a certain amount of points, and one of the primary ways you get points is by attacking. So this ensures that there is always action. Everybody's always incentivized to be aggressive, which keeps the game from kind of falling into, everybody kind of turtling and building up their armies. There's some other interesting twists on kind of how you're interacting with the game. One is the primary action selection mechanism on your turns. you have this pyramid that has different actions that you can take. But over the 5 actions that you take with your tokens, you have to ensure that you take 1 action out of each level of the pyramid. So you got to kind of plan ahead of which ones you're going to take. They may be moving or attacking, or you're doing some different kinds of upgrades. And so it's kind of an interesting way to decide which things you're doing on your turn. The battle mechanism is interesting because instead of chucking dice, you're actually going to have cards where every player has the same 8 cards, and you're going to secretly choose one that's going to be a modifier to the different aspects of the battle for your army. And so there's a bit of this bluffing element. And additionally, you're going to be discarding secretly another battle card besides the one you played, which means that people don't know what you have left in your hand and keeps a little bit of that unknown as you go into future battles. And it definitely reduces a lot of the luck in the game and replaces it with a little bit more of this bluffing. Now, on top of all of this is this layer of upgrades. And so there's this huge array of different categories of upgrades. I think there's something like 48 of them available at the beginning of the game. And when you have the opportunity to get these, they can do anything from minor effects like, bumping up your attack value in all of your battles, to crazy things like you get to bring your own giant scorpion onto the map that gets to go around with your army and modify things. And so as the game progresses, each player is going to really kind of customize their own strategy based on which of these upgrades they get. And there's going to be unique, big other creatures on the map that some players have and some players don't, which really adds a lot of interest into the game. So if you really are looking for that constant conflict, but you maybe want a little bit less luck factor and some of these other kind of interesting modern design patterns and kind of some upgrades, we think Kemet is definitely one to check out.
So if you love in Risk, a battle spanning over the entire globe, we don't think a game does it better than our 4th recommendation here, Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle is a 2-player only game where you and your opponent are actually playing out the historical event of the Cold War. One of you is playing as USA, one of you is playing as USSR. And the game is really interesting because at the start of the game, the battle is only happening here in Europe, in Asia, and in the Middle East. Those are the only regions that you're kind of battling over. And the game is, you're not using troops or anything like that. Instead, you're dealt a hand of cards every round. And these cards are historical events. And so some of the cards are USA historical events, and some of them are USSR historical events. And so the main strategy in Twilight Struggle is how to best play these cards. When you play a card that is for your own side, so if I'm USA and I play a USA card, I can decide to either play it for the event, which would do something good for me, or I can play it for its operation value, which is going to allow me to play influence out into countries. I could make a coup, I could do realignment rolls, all sorts of stuff. But the real tension comes when I play a card that's an event for the opponent, because I can use it for its influence points, but then it's going to trigger the event that helps my opponent. So the real tension is the game is you're going to have to play these cards, but when do you play them? As the game progresses, slowly the map opens up and eventually you're placing influence throughout the entire world. And the way you ultimately win the game is by maximizing these scoring cards. So I told you, you have these hand of cards that you're playing. Well, in the game, scoring cards for the different regions are mixed into those cards, but you don't know when they're coming up. So you don't know, when is Europe going to be scored? When is the Middle East going to be scored? You never actually know for sure. And so there's this tension of what scoring cards might my opponent have? What scoring cards? When should I play my scoring cards? Maybe I have a scoring card that I know my opponent is winning in. Is there anything I can do in that region to help? Or am I going to just give away that I have the scoring card if I start doing all sorts of things in that region? There's so many other great mechanisms in the game that allow you to kind of manipulate your hand. There's a space race that you can actually discard one of your cards and send it to the space race, and that's a great way to get rid of a card that is really advantageous for your opponent. Just the way it brings the theme of the Cold War into this kind of battle spanning the entire globe. Twilight Struggle is a fantastic game to check out. Now, it is a beast. It is 3 hours to play, but I figure, if you've played Risk, you're used to playing long games, and so we really think this is an awesome one to check out. We've enjoyed it a ton, and so our fourth recommendation here is Twilight Struggle.
Our last recommendation here is probably the hardest one to recommend, at least broadly, simply because it is a very complex game, very hard to teach, and that is Root. Now, Root, part of the reason it is so difficult to learn is because it's highly asymmetrical. And by that, I mean the different factions in the game literally play completely differently. Different goals, different mechanisms of how they play on their turn. And so everyone around the table has to kind of understand when you're playing with the 4 different factions, not only what does my faction do and how does it work, but I need to understand your faction so that I know how to keep you in check and understand kind of the strategic landscape on the board. And it's very interesting. It's this theme of woodland creatures. It's very kind of cute and fun, but still aggressive, where the cat faction has kind of taken over the forest and is trying to build lots of buildings and keep their connected infrastructure of wood production, while the Eerie Dynasty birds are kind of off in the corner but want to expand and take back the forest to get to their former glory. And they're going with this whole kind of card programming mechanism where they're adding cards to this decree, but if ever they can't execute one of the actions in the decree, they go into turmoil and overthrow their leader, and you have to kind of reset. And they're trying to expand and get more of their roosts on the board. All the while, the small animals of the forest, as the Woodland Alliance, are trying to garner sympathy and lead to being able to do revolts against the larger animals of the forest. And this is all while the lone little raccoon vagabond is wandering around, going on quests and trading with the different factions. And so it's a lot to take in when you're learning how to play this game with a group. But all of that interconnected complexity is also what makes it such a rich sandbox to play in. And you get into such interesting board states or, situations where you need to keep a certain faction in check and how you can actually go about doing that. It's very much the type of game where everyone is jockeying for position. It is a race ultimately to 30 points. And while each faction kind of goes about points in their own different ways, everybody's kind of muscling and trying to pull back somebody that's leading. And it tends to self-balance to a certain degree, at least if the players really understand the different factions, to where it keeps the game fairly close and somebody's going to squeeze out on top at the end. But the enjoyment of the game is much more about the interesting situations and about that process of kind of jockeying within a very interesting strategic landscape. So if you really like kind of just interesting interactions and like a board state that has you kind of looking at it and like, how's this person doing? What are they trying to do here? And just interesting situations. Root's got that in spades. You're going to want 3 to 4 players, most likely. There's some people that have enjoyed it with 2, especially if you get some of the expansion stuff that helps at the 2-player count. But you're going to probably want 3 to 4 and consistent group, because you're really going to benefit from a group that continues to learn it and play it together, really understand the factions, play different factions. And this is a game that probably is the wrong pick for the 90% of people watching this video. But if you're in that 10%, this just might be your dream game. And so if what I've described here sounds like something your group might be up for, you might consider looking more into Root.
Thanks for watching. Like we mentioned, if you want to check out any of the games that we talked about in this video, we've got them down linked below. And YouTube's got a couple recommended videos here of other things that we've created that you can check out for yourself. And we will see you guys in the next video.